How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Pixelated Thoughts. And on today's episode, it's just going to be Brad and I. And we're going to be talking about Ubisoft. And usually when we bring them up, I would say it's usually negative. And that's the case today because we just learned that Ubisoft is currently seeing its shares at a 10-year low. They just announced, I think, that Star Wars Outlaws only sold 1 million copies in a month, and they had to completely reconfigure their forecasts and their sales projections. And then lastly, Assassin's Creed Shadows is now going to be released on February 14th, 2025. So just about a 6-month delay. It was initially going to come out in November, I believe, right, Brad? So, I mean, 3 months later,
Yeah.
probably for polish purposes. I guess the other thing is X Defiant. If you have played it, we thought it was okay. That was pretty fun. Apparently the player base and the player count rather, is just dropping significantly. So, um, Ubisoft has actually announced, I think through various like messages or corporate messages, that they're like, hey, we're going to be looking at our strategies moving forward. So my question to Brad is this surprising to you? Did we finally get it right that Ubisoft is going to kind of, you know, find themselves in a situation where putting out the same product over and over again, this repetition finally caught up
Yeah.
to them?
So I think this is kind of a callback to one of our first episodes. It was like one of the first 10 episodes we did was pretty much Ubisoft sucks. Um, they established that they have a development model, right? When after the division came out, they said going forward, the division was so successful that pretty much every game is going to be division-esque, and they changed Assassin's Creed to follow a similar path. They changed pretty or any new IP that they tried to create, they tried to make a looter shooter esque, big number get bigger. Here's some loot crates to accentuate Assassin's Creed, Valhalla. Uh,
Had that XP modifier or whatever it
yeah,
was.
like just there's not only were they repetitious, but they were literally the same thing with paint a coat of paint, just slapped on top of it. And I think it's starting to catch up. Having a string of underwhelming games, right? Skull and Bones,
I mean, 8 years,
Avatar.
with Skull and Bones, you go 8 years into development, you essentially owe the country of Singapore money. I think when we first played through the beta, we saw, what was it, like almost 30 studios had worked on this from Ubisoft, which is insane because we didn't think Ubisoft had that many studios to begin with, but we were just kind of shocked that many people had put their hands on this game, and it was still subpar. And I remember we did the preview for it, right? We did a beta video, and Brad got into an argument with a guy because he wrote this like long, like, you guys don't know shit. Like, just because Ubisoft did it in the past with some of their monetization practices, I'm like, that's been their business model. Ubisoft's business model has been max monetization, microtransactions, DLC, all that stuff, right? And you and I have said this, like, live service titles, we don't care if it isn't a premium like title. If we're talking like if it's a premium price. If I'm paying full
Right.
price like $60 for a game, and then you're throwing in all these like really egregious microtransactions, and we're talking like I have to pay for ship colors or the flags and stuff like that. It's like that's we're getting excessive. And so you have Skull and Bones, and then X Defiant goes into, I think, like 35 to 40 technical tests, and then they were like, fuck it, let's just release it. And on the surface, it looks generic. It is serviceable. It is not a bad title, but it really felt like it lacked that real oomph in terms of like the way Ubisoft was like getting behind those games. But
It
still,
I
but the
Sorry.
microtransactions, and we saw that too. What was like $40 for something, like for like a skin or something? We were like,
Yeah.
what is going on?
Yeah, and and when you do make a free to play game, right? Um, I think it gives you numbers regardless, right? So Skull and Bones, right? Someone has to pay for that. X Defiant, you don't. It's just free. However, um, even the price of admission sometimes is not worth it, even when it's free.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can definitely try the game out, test the game out, but you know, in a live service title, if you're only playing for we played for like 2 weeks. If you only play for 2 weeks, if your retention is 2 weeks, that's not a live service game. That's a JRPG at most. Um,
It's a Persona game. Like, I got 60 to 100 hours. But I mean, you're not lying. Like, I mean, when you look at their service model, and I've told people this in private, I think that if you want to talk about successful live service titles, I think Ubisoft has it covered. Well, I mean, games like Rainbow Six Siege, For Honor, um, The Crew, Ghost Recon, The Division 2, right? They they were able to do something that I think most major publishers were not able to, and that was create a successful live service game and create this formula. But the problem was they got really excessive about it, and they just kind of like threw almost everything at it. And the games that weren't surprisingly, like Watch Dogs 2, for example. I'm not gonna name the first one because not many people like that game, but Watch Dogs 2 was an example of a good Ubisoft game where I don't think the microtransactions were too intrusive, but it's like they didn't like it just didn't sell well. But I don't know what Ubisoft's expectations were for sales for non-live service titles, because they're like, all right, screw it, we're just Watch Dogs Legion comes out, right? It's really an experimental title. It doesn't do well, but like I think they moved the goalposts so far, and were my thought process was maybe they took single player games and then put them together with live service titles and said, okay, now you guys all have to meet this expectation. Like the Division sold this many copies, and we expect everything to sell this many. And what was so frustrating was that we looked at some of the games that were coming out. And we're like, you're pretty much reskinning certain titles that you had. Like Avatar is essentially Far Cry, right? Are there new things in it? Absolutely. Is Avatar a beautiful game? It's one of the best looking games that they've put out, 100%. But it's Far Cry, and anyone who says it's not is fucking lying to themselves, right? And then you look at Star Wars Outlaws, and everyone's like, this is like Assassin's Creed. You're just putting Star Wars in it. And it simplistic gameplay, sure. But the other complaint was you were getting titles that were coming out, single player games that were unpolished, buggy, messes. It really felt like the gameplay just did not match a stand or didn't meet a standard that meant I could like shell out that much money, because I think it was like it's a $70 title, and then you have the different was it the different editions of them, the deluxe edition, the gold edition, the ultimate edition. Their pricing structure just got out of hand, and I'm like, so eventually we Brad and I've talked about this like a lot. We're like, when does it actually hit bottom? Because Ubisoft Plus, if you pay $19 or $20 a month, you can literally play the ultimate edition of a game, which is great. But it's like, does it have to come to that for me to want to play some of the titles that we know or that we firmly believe just won't be or won't have the same impact like they used to? Like when we talk about Ubisoft, when we look at their history, we're like Rainbow Six, Splinter Cell, Assassin's Creed. We're like, these games were fantastic. Rayman, all that stuff. And now we're like,
Oddballers.
odd. And now we're like, Riders Republic, not a bad game, but a live service title. For Honor, not a bad game, good game, live service title. For some reason, Ubisoft just kept running with it, and then now it finally caught up to them, because I think that like a lot of people expected Assassin's Creed Shadows to come out. I was, I've told you and Chris, I said I think this is probably going to be a really successful game, because everyone's been, demanding a Japanese themed Assassin's Creed game. We're getting it, and now it's delayed until February. We're assuming that's because of polish concerns, but also maybe this is the time for Ubisoft to kind of sit back and ponder whether or not their pricing strategies have worked or are still enticing enough, because You brought this up before in previous videos. There is no reason why a single player title needs a double XP microtransaction. Why these types of games need microtransactions, like having was it like there was one for all the maps, there was one for like certain like health healing kits, that type of stuff. And I'm like, I get it if you know if you want to make a game easier, but you can do that in game. Just make sure that you have the ability to adjust the difficulty instead of having one generic difficulty slider or blanket difficulty slider. Why not just have multiple sliders? That's what I've seen a lot of games do that now. I really feel
Yeah,
like we've gotten to that point where Ubisoft, I think like all the shady shit that they've done, all the things that people were literally like you and I were at the mountaintop, like, hey, I don't know if you guys know this, but this isn't good. you know, like we've seen a string of like average experiences, especially the full price premium ones, and we were curious as to when the bottom was going to happen, and the fact that that their shares hit a 10-year low, and they're delaying probably one of the biggest games of the fall. You know, maybe they're here.
I when they first announced that, and they canceled the Japan show or
Oh,
the
TGS,
expo.
yeah, the expo for
Yeah,
TGS, yeah,
they canceled their whole.
whole
I
presentation,
don't know.
yeah.
Yeah, um, my thought was Call of Duty comes out this month, and I'm like, maybe they don't want to compete with Call of Duty, but in February, Monster Hunter and Avowed comes out,
you
so
are
I'm like,
you are moving
I
like
mean,
what people have failed to realize is that you're moving into far more competitive territories now. Like you have Monster Hunter coming out. We don't know when Ghost of Yote comes out, which is the sequel to Ghost of Tsushima. That I mean, imagine if like Sony was like, yeah, let's have this come out February 14th. Like oh my god.
and
Um,
I'm assuming that the Switch 2 is going to come out in a
like
relatively
short period of
similar
time, right?
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, they might get. I don't know if there's a good release. Nothing really seems to release in December, but it's like I don't know if there's really a good time for it to release if it doesn't release as soon as possible.
Yeah, you're being fairly ballsy with taking a franchise that has been generally successful whenever it releases, even if the quality of game has dipped a little bit. Um, because like I was excited for them to make shorter, smaller experiences like Assassin's Creed Mirage. Not a great game by any means. Good, pretty fun. Took away all the RPG elements, a 15-hour experience ish, but you got it for like $40, which I thought was, pretty positive thing. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Love that game. Absolutely fantastic, but also, it's a Metroidvania, so you're gonna get maybe 10 hours, roughly, and you paid $40 for it. Like, absolutely, 100%. But when you buy an open world title, there's Ubisoft has a formula, and everyone anticipates that they're going to stay with that formula, no matter how they try to tweak the narrative or add to the gameplay. And I think that was like one of my biggest beefs with like Star Wars Outlaws. It's like, yeah, you're essentially taking like some shooting from the Division. I would say like some stealth mechanics from Assassin's Creed or Watch Dogs, but you get to a point where you're like,
Splinter
oh
Cell.
yeah, no, no, not at all. Oh yeah, you have like one thing that the Mark and Execute was there, but it's like none of it was like deep. Like it was all very surface level, all very shallow, and the AI was so stupid that you could get away with whatever you wanted. And then, you know, uh, the the syndicate system to me like just lacked any real depth, especially when I was getting later into the game, because there are no consequences really to you betraying a syndicate. There is like, oh wow, our reputation's down now, but you can do like 3 missions and now we're friends again. It's like the fuck is the point? Um, so my thing is now that we're here, now that maybe Ubisoft is facing certain consequences, what do you want to see moving forward from them, like in terms of changes? What would you like to see first?
Um,
More
first thing I would
features.
like, the first thing I would like to see is Beyond Good and Evil 2. that would be number one.
First off,
Uh,
that shit does not exist, and I don't give a fuck what anyone says. What country do they
uh,
owe money for that game? I think that's the real question.
the global economy at this point.
I know. we,
Um,
we have them
w-
hostage.
Once again, I mean, go back to what has worked in the past. You know, I'm assuming they're working on a new division, right? It's like
No,
like,
they
hey,
didn't they cancel Heartland?
they canceled Heartland, or there's still Resurgence. I think.
Is that the mobile one?
I think so. But once again, I don't know. I don't see them abandoning the IP, right? They might retool it, recreate. I don't know, but it's like, you know, it was good. I enjoyed it. Um, like you've got to rework philosophy. Like you've got to. I don't honestly. I am not sure. Like if I was to go into their board meeting and go, "Hey, do this, or you're not going to survive." Like I honestly don't know what this is because they they've had bad games and then they've had okay games, which is probably even worse because it's like I can't be mad at you for making this game, right? Outlaws. It's like I can't be mad at you for making this game, but I can be mad at you for not making what this game could have been. It's just like you have added so many good concepts, you just haven't fleshed out any of them. It's
Yeah,
like
it was the weirdest thing because like visually, I think Outlaws is stunning. I do. I mean, their facial animation still sucks. It's still not great. Um,
the main character.
the
Just
K Vest just looks weird, and she's also generic. You know, she's a relatively generic character. And you're right. Star Wars Outlaws did feature a number of really interesting concepts, but like my primary beef with that game was it played it too safe. Right? We have a character. We are living essentially in the gray. Okay. Star Wars has always been generally good versus evil, and when they touch on the gray stuff, that would be like the Clone Wars, Rebels, Rogue One, that type of stuff, Andor. It's like they really kind of like showcase how Star Wars can get grounded and grim and mature, and I'm like, that was what I was expecting in Outlaws. And instead, we essentially got like this really paper thin plot with like characters who are like, we're both good and bad. Like, whatever your assumptions were after the first like 4 to 6 hours, where you were expecting like the moment the game opened up and you were able to explore other planets, you're probably saying to yourself, like, yeah, we're going to see a variation of how Ubisoft does stuff. And then you get in and you're like, oh shit, they're just doing the same things again. They're hitting the same check boxes. They literally backed themselves up and said, let's like we're probably doing too much, and let's just kind of constrict back to what's comfortable. And to me, it's one of the things where like innovation is scary. It is, because when you look at all the small indie titles that you and I have said like these are fantastic games, and then we go and look at how many people bought it, we're just completely discouraged. We're like, oh shit, there goes that studio. No. And then you see Ubisoft, and it's like they've played it safe but they've been successful, like grossly successful, right? Far Cry, The Division, Assassin's Creed, all these franchises have like rich histories to them, right? But every time you go into like you go from Far Cry 3 to Far Cry 4, you're like, not much has changed except for the setting, maybe some slight alterations to the story. And then you go Far Cry 4 to Far Cry 5, and it's like not much has changed except for the setting and the visuals, and they had like a weird thing, with the narrative. And then you go to Far Cry 6, you're like, what the fuck just happened? Like, what just happened? How did this get so boring so quickly? You know what I mean? Like, you literally had one of the best villains, like one of the best character actors in Giancarlo Esposito, and you fucking ruined that. Like, what? Okay. You look at Assassin's Creed, right? Everyone, even Chris, who has platinum damn near every game, and we made fun of him for trying to platinum Assassin's Creed 3 for like an hour. We go in and we say, okay, we hit Syndicate. We're like, Syndicate's not working. The system is failing, right? We need to innovate. And so they make it more of an RPG with Origins. And we're like, that's good shit. It's a good start. It's still Assassin's Creed, but there's RPG elements. There's new ways for combat. beautiful new visuals. We're like, oh great. Odyssey comes out. It's really not an Assassin's Creed game. I'm gonna be fucking real about it. Assassin's Creed Odyssey felt like they were like, hey, you're like a god, so you can just kick shit randomly and never die. Do you want to jump
Well,
off
yeah,
the Cyclops and just fuck it, or the Colossus of Rhodes and just land on the fucking ground, and just like and I
I
was
mean
like,
that's Valhalla.
you
I
know,
mean, you're just like you're a Viking. Like you're not.
But Valhalla to me was a significantly worse game than Odyssey. They took it from this beautiful, bright, like I felt like Odyssey popped off because of like the beautiful visuals and the bright locations. You get to Valhalla, we're like England, 1600s. I'm like,
Well,
fuck.
well, okay. I mean, it makes sense for what they're trying to do.
Right.
I will say that I feel like a lot of their games they tried to grab a concept, and like the game is that one thing, which is not good for a vast RPG. Take Valhalla for example, right? You're not an assassin. You're like friends of the assassins, and they give you a blade, but you're still a Viking that goes on raiding
And
parties
and on
and just runs through
and
and
on top of that,
murders.
and on top of that, you need to be a certain level to assassinate people. Like
Right, right, and
you
it's
can't. There's no assassinations anymore. Like stealth is useless because
um
combat is so much better when you're throwing fucking 1,000 axes out
right,
of midair. You know, like what the
right.
fuck is going
It
on?
looks cool, but it's not Assassin's Creed. And Watch Dogs Legion. So I was drastically saddened by this game because it had such a great concept. The concept was you could recruit anyone that you talk to, right?
Such a
Like
brilliant concept.
that is like that entire game is built around just being able to recruit grandmas and policemen and secret agent men, right? Like you can just recruit anyone you want to. However, it is such a minute detail of the game, right? They're like, this is the core concept, and everything is built around it, but it has no consequence in the game whatsoever. You can use the first default character and play the entire game as long as you don't die. If you die, then
Yeah.
you're kind of screwed. But it's like it. I feel like so many times they're like, ooh, our players like the alien mode in Rainbow Six Siege. So we're gonna build a game about aliens, and then no one plays it because you need something else other than just
I
aliens.
love the
Like
fact
there
that
has to
they're
be
like, it's an extraction shooter. We're like, yeah. Like, remember when we played it as a limited time event and then you wanted to charge full fucking price for this game? And then once the public outcry got so big, you're like, whoa, 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 $40. And then we're like, we're still not playing it. Like, I don't think you understand how this fucking works, my guy. There's something you brought up about Legion that I think is very important. And when you talk about they get to this concept and they as they're fleshing it out and they're like, you can recruit anyone as long as you don't die. And I was like, permadeath is such a fucking like harsh thing for any game, right? There's a fear, there's an inherent fear by players when you're playing a game and you know that you dying means everything resets or you could lose all progress, right? And they went, instead of permadeath, you can turn that off. And I'm pretty sure most players didn't do that. Most players did that. They like, fuck that. I don't want to lose any of my roster. You have to like the fact that Ubisoft and their development teams weren't willing to kind of take that next step tells me like everything I need to know about their development process. Where even if you have the ability to like literally do something innovative, they're gonna err on the side of caution. And that's what they did that's what every game they've done. Right? Riders Republic, to me, once again, good game. But it's like, who the fuck is this for? Like, you know, and when you look at something like The Crew, it's like, yeah, this makes sense, right? You know, racing wherever you want, however you want to do it. It's like, that's an amazing concept. But then you're playing it, it's like everything, every mechanic is like surface level, right? One of the most frustrating things recently was Ghost Recon Breakpoint, right? Ghost Recon, a squad based game, has been since its inception in the 90s. We're like, oh shit, Breakpoint's coming. We liked Wildlands. I played the first technical test. I played the alpha and the beta, right? I did all the surveys. Ubisoft's response was nothing. They literally kept the shit the same the entire time. Why are you level gating in a military sim shooter? And then also, Why
The
the
Division.
fuck? Yeah, why the fuck are you taking away your AI squad? You spent a whole. They had to. I think it took 2 years for them to retool the game to the point where they were like, yeah, now we have all these features. I'm like, at what point do people look at the? At what point does Ubisoft sit there and go, I don't think we can do this anymore. Like, it's not working, because every other developer, every other major publisher, like, they're cool with rolling with the punches. Xbox is cool if a game fails. Not really. I mean, that's why they're probably going third party. But like, Sony is cool when a game doesn't like immediately sell right out of the gates. They try to support it. I mean, you can't say that about Concord. They killed that game, right? But it's like, developers know that there's going to be games that are going to fail. Sometimes you're going to get unexpected hits. That's just what it is. But you can't just continuously run the same system out there and then expect something to like work, because you remember, these are live service titles. So the purpose of these games is to be out there for as long as humanly possible. I think For Honor is almost at like 7 years. I think Siege is almost in a decade in, isn't it? Didn't that come out in 2015 ish? I think like
Sounds about right.
next year is like the 10-year anniversary of Siege. So you have games running for this long, but that's your entire fucking catalog. What is the point of creating a new game if that is what you're going to, if essentially you're going to take that formula and just flop it and reskin it, right? Like, imagine, and this was our beef with Extraction. It's like, so yeah, we took this limited time mode, we're making it into a full time game, but like, it it pretty much depends on your level of enjoyment with that limited time mode that most people didn't even remember. And then with Skull and Bones, it was like, do you guys remember Assassin's Creed when you guys had shipboard combat? Yeah, this is that. That's all it is. And I was like, is it like an optional game mode or something? No, it's a full-fledged game. It's a quadruple A title. What
No,
the fuck are you talking about?
you know that game, World of Tanks?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's that in water. Like,
it's
that's
that.
pretty much what
It's
it.
that in water, but not as technical. One, and two, and not as interesting. You know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah,
not only that, we're gonna charge you $70 to play it. Like,
because it's
no,
a quadruple A game.
no
So
shit, it fucking failed. No shit, it's not doing well. No, like, it's not just like I've said, like, Ubisoft is generally really consistent when it comes to their pipeline. Games release within like the 3 period, but they're not releasing in finished states or even acceptable states, for that matter. And they keep coming out, and we're like, oh, okay, so you just fucking reskinned Far Cry into Avatar. Okay. Oh, you just reskinned fucking Watch Dogs into Star Wars Outlaws. All right. Oh, you just took a fucking side mode and made it into a whole game in Skull and Bones. Sure. At some point, Ubisoft, and also, 8-year development cycles is, come on, guys. Like when they talk about AAA pipeline, it's like an 8-year development cycle is like, what the fuck are we making? Are we making like a movie that just won't get approved by any production studio? Like, this better be the most innovative piece of fucking tech I've ever seen. You better be doing shit in this game that I've never seen before. But instead, it's like, hey man, you can shoot your cannons that way. No, no way, bro. This is how we're running stuff. And then, I remember, thinking about Beyond Good and Evil 2. Just fucking don't release it. I think the director left. I think the actual guy left recently. And I'm like, just move on. Cut your fucking losses. Unless like they're actually getting grants from the country that they're developing in, which is totally possible. Just move on. Like, you guys had to re-release the HD version of Beyond Good and Evil and be like, this is the 25th anniversary, though. It's like, holy shit. Do you guys know that you shouldn't be doing 20 years between sequels unless you're fucking Space Marine 2? Play that game instead. That game's fucking awesome. I just don't see... I'll be honest. I think if anyone is thinking to themselves that Assassin's Creed Shadows is going to be significantly different from previous games, I think they're lying to themselves. I think you have to be like a Ubisoft super fan.
So my question is, do they if Shadows doesn't do um what it's supposed to do financially,
Sales wise, like,
do, yeah, do they survive?
does Ubisoft survive?
Yeah,
Here's my thought so I don't think so. One, that's a good question because I don't think Ubisoft is what I would consider like one of those monster publishers. You know, I don't really consider them. They're I think they're buyable. I guess is the best word for
right.
it, right?
Yeah.
Um,
They have big IPs.
a lot of people have been very outspoken in regard to one Ubisoft's leadership because I think that the CEO of Ubisoft is fucking just universally disliked because of Ubisoft's shitty, workplace culture, right? But I honestly believe that if Assassin's Creed Shadows fail, I think they're going to be up for sale. I think that there's almost no fucking chance. But let me, I really don't think it's going to fail. I think that Assassin's Creed Shadows is going to do well enough. The thing is, when I see reviews on this game, and this is why I think a lot of people don't trust major media outlets anymore, is because I think there's a level of, or there's this lack of like fair criticism, right? Like call a game out if it's buggy, dock them a point for not releasing a tile that should be polished after years of development, that type of stuff. What are people expecting? Are we expect like to me? I think Assassin's Creed Shadows may end up being something like Syndicate, but just a more polished version of it. I do. I mean, you have two characters who are significantly different from one another in terms of like mobility and ability. So the question I think is that can Shadow will Assassin's Creed fail? I mean, this is going to be a big test too because I there was already controversy stupidly about having Yasuke as like the main character when he's a fucking real samurai and a real person that actually
Yeah, I met
existed in
them.
that time frame. Yeah, you were back in the 1400s dabbing him up, but it's fascinating because if Assassin's Creed Shadows fails, if it doesn't meet sales projections and this actually tanks the stock for Ubisoft further, man, because you have man, if you're looking at it, you have 6 months. I'm like on pins and there's a
Yeah.
potential for another delay, right? Like you could always be delayed again if like you go into internal testing and let's say you have a December event. Let's December January event, right? Early.
So
You have one of those events and it like the previews aren't good. I'm not saying they're going to tank, but I say they're buyable. Just pointing that out. They are buyable.
yeah, like I don't think they go away. I don't think they go bankrupt and just disappear. But so with Shadows, I'm just from memory of previous games that I've recently played from them. I'm hoping it's not one of those. Hey, the concept of this game is you're a samurai, so enjoy doing samurai things, right? I hope they're not just grasping onto the concept of hey, you're in Japan and you're a samurai. I
Right.
hope there is an expansion of things to do. I hope they're not like Ghost of Tsushima was great. Um, you know,
But
other Japanese esque games. It's like, hey, those did fantastic. So let's make a Japanese based game. I really hope it's like a hey, we have like dedicated things that we want to implement or
the
experiment with. I
the
hope I hope it's not that.
well, I think that I think the conversation surrounding Shadows is going to be interesting because I feel like when you're touching upon, a fictional history, right? People are going to want you to respect certain aspects of a character, right? Of an individual who existed. My question is, what changes have you made ultimately from Valhalla, right? And I think this preview at TGS at the Tokyo Game Show would have been very important to kind of giving people information. Just recently, I played the Metaphor demo, and I talked to you about that. And in the video I released, I said I think demos have become almost crucial um, for new IPs and even existing titles because we as a society, we as a community, as a game community, we are trying to become more informed about the games that we're getting our hands on because of the price increases that we're seeing. I think Shadows is $70, right? I'm assuming. So, and then
for the base game.
yeah, for the base game. The digital deluxe edition is like 90 or some shit, and then you have the other editions. So the question really is, you know, I think it's going to sell well enough to kind of meet certain expectations of like Mirage, to say like 5 million copies. I think that's where it's going to hit. But the question is, what if it doesn't review well or preview well? What if there's something that it hits a snag and people are like, why would I buy this game in February? Especially if Ghosts of Yote come out at the same time, which I don't think it's going to. I think it's going to be
Right.
second half of the year. But I think that if you are Ubisoft and you're sitting there, you know that you're in a tight window. Like, legitimately, you have to realize right now that Monster Hunter Wilds is more than likely going to be the best selling game for that month. It is going to knock everything out of the fucking park.
You
If
also have Like a Dragon
you also have
coming out
Like a
too.
Dragon, right? But that might sell well. But like, if you're Ubisoft, and dude, when does Wilds come out? Is it 25th, 21st? Like, it's the end of the month of February, I
28th.
think, 28th. So you have to be able to be in people's heads because you know that Wilds is going to get a ton of previews. People are going to be in, because remember, once again, like, and we just talked about this, like, the pricing is crazy right now. So now that we're looking at two $70 titles going at one another, gamers are going to have to make an informed decision. And if you never see how Capcom actually treats Monster Hunter, with Rise and Worlds, they had previews come out damn near monthly. And then when we got into the month of release for those games, they were going fucking crazy with developer updates. And I think with Assassin's Creed, if you're not in people's headspace the moment that this game releases, right? The moment that um, Shadows comes out, if it's not fucking filling people's heads, if it's not considered a game of the year contender, especially with Wilds right on the corner, you might see people fucking skip this game completely and just wait to the end of the month because they know they're going to get a high quality experience because Monster Hunter, the last two titles, Rise and Worlds, has continuously delivered. And because Wilds looks like Worlds, which is one of the best selling titles of all time, guess what? You may find yourself in a place where your sales expectations may need to shrink again for Assassin's Creed Shadows, which would be, in my opinion, fucking catastrophic. So if a delay happens, which I think, which listen, I maybe I don't know, like April and May are also March, April, and May are going to be busy too. So when do you come out with this, and do you consider potentially putting putting Shadows on one of these platforms like PlayStation Plus or Game Pass? Because let's be honest with ourselves, I know Ubisoft's not going to do that because they have Ubisoft Plus, but there's no reason to have Ubisoft Plus if you're not going to consistently put out games. If the next release for you guys isn't until February, like that was the plan for us, right? We were like, yeah, we're gonna fucking pay $18 to play Shadows. But now that I think Shadows was releasing by itself too in November, and the fact that that at the in September at a preview event you canceled everything makes us wonder, like, what type of fucking shape was this game in? You guys put out a 14-minute demo, and I thought it looked pretty good. Did I think, was it innovative? No, I thought it looked like, a cooler looking Assassin's Creed set in Japan. That's what I thought. I was like, so, I mean, what are you gonna do? Like, how are you gonna innovate the series? It's so hard when I think like you hit a point where you were pulling like the supernatural out, right? A lot of people are gonna say the series peaked with 2 and Black Flag, and then with the new series it was like Origins really good, Odyssey was really good, Valhalla was like, fuck are we doing? Is it an RPG, right? Do people want to play a bloated title again with level gating? Like, like what are you doing to the series? It's really hard to take a franchise that has been around for, what would you say now, like almost 20 years? Yeah, holy shit, like 20 years now.
Yeah.
and make it make the formula fresh. And I would say, like, dude, if it would be crazy if Ubisoft released this in February and people were like, the reviews and previews are bad. Can you imagine? Oh, dude. Can you imagine an Assassin's Creed game selling 1 million copies? It's not gonna happen. I'm just
What
saying. That would be
was it?
fucking insane.
Was it IGN that gave Space Marine 2 like a 60?
No, that was PC Gamer.
PC Gamer.
But
Yeah.
IGN
Right.
also fucking talked about a game where it said it was too much water or something like that. Where I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Or they said something really like slightly racist. I think it was like a GTA game. Oh no, it was like Miles Morales. Like, oh, they caught him like about black culture and black youth. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? You're criticizing it for this shit? Like, you guys are crazy.
I typically look at the Kotaku reviews first,
Mhm.
because it's usually the opposite. So it's like whatever they say, I'm just going to completely leap to the other conclusion that they don't make. Um, but yeah, dude, that would be vindicating for me personally, just because it's like you've screwed with us for so long. But it would be crushing, as in means we're probably not going to get another one, or it's
Well, I mean,
I don't know.
um, was it Shigeru Miyamoto from Nintendo said like a delayed game, you know, it's not bad when if a game gets delayed. You know what I mean? You just don't want to put out a bad game. My thought process is like every game that Ubisoft puts out, every game that comes out now is going to have concerns about polish, right? But I think with Ubisoft, it's like it's not just polish anymore, right? When you have established franchises, I think the question now becomes like, what are you
And you have
doing?
47
Yeah,
studios that work for you. It's
yeah.
like
Like,
Jesus.
like can we like fucking find one that isn't that's going to innovate, that's going to like do. I mean, dude, they fucking literally took the Prince of Persia game, right? Remember, they're like, we're really it's gonna come out in 2025. And they're like, fuck that, that game was the preview was bad. This thing sucked. We're gonna redo the whole thing, right? So they're like, once again, Ubisoft's not afraid to stick to a title once it's announced. They are literally committed to a project. The problem is when they commit to a project, it always comes out generic. It always just squeaks by in terms of adequacy. It's one of those things where you're like, at some point you have to say to yourself, like, let's do a big change up. Shadows isn't going to be that. Like, we both know that. Shadows could be the best version of the new Assassin's Creed titles, and I still think people would be like, it's still the same formula. Nothing much has changed. And I would not disagree. But I think that's a good question because I think Ubisoft is at that point where it's like, look, man, imagine you having the fucking, like, you having to make the hard decision to delay what is essentially going to be your biggest title in the last couple years that could potentially see like a massive sales surge, which is what Assassin's Creed is. But if it's only going to be seen as a stopgap solution and the rest of the games you put out afterward fail, then maybe it's time for you to like reconsider like the way you go with your project processes. Do I think it's going to happen? No. I think Ubisoft has a better chance of being bought out first than they do of making like drastic changes to their IP. Apparently, fucking there was a report that like Splinter Cell, because it was announced like a couple years ago that they are working on a new title, that what they had there just was not up to like certain standards. So I'm like, fuck are we doing here? So with Ubisoft, once again, like, I know that we don't want to bash on it. I think we have 3 videos now. I think we've done videos on their games. You know what I mean? Just shit talking the game. But it's the thing. They have become this kind of standard of, you know, they had this success early with a bunch of live service titles. You know, they've stuck with their games. We commend them for doing that. We think it's fantastic that they're willing to stick with these games.
Hyperscape.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hypers. I mean, they killed them. That was sad. You know,
Roller Champions. I
I
mean,
think that's still live. I
oh, is
think.
it?
I think there's like 3
Was it
people.
ever? Was it ever alive? That's my real question. Was
I
that
think I,
ever?
I think there's like 5 people committed to fucking going around in circles and shit.
There's
Uh,
a there's there's a competitive scene, and that's all it is.
X
That's all there.
X Defiant is still alive for now, right? It's in season 2. Once again, I look at Ubisoft and I really, outside of them and EA, they were always in a competition with one another to see who could be either the worst publisher or the most generic. And I mean, EA kind of like threw a dart at the board and was like, dude, fucking NCAA's back, but it's really, kind of like an arcadey version of Madden. And we were just like so starved for that franchise. We're like, fuck yeah, dude, let's go. But I think with Ubisoft, it's like, there's nothing wrong with hitting familiar titles, right? With going to existing IPs. There's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is when you start to take your existing Ubisoft formula for the open world and then apply it to every game, it kind of becomes boring. And I think I know there's going to be Ubisoft fans out there who will deny that shit and just, fight to the death. But let's call it what it is. It is concerning that a major publisher had to see their stocks drop, certain games that people worked really hard on, like flounder and essentially, fail to meet expectations. And then, have you seen the roadmap though for Star Wars Outlaws? Have you seen it? What it said? Like, it's like, oh, we're gonna update, we're gonna fix technical issues, and then we're gonna update stealth and shooting. I'm like, it's too fucking late to do that. Like, you
I've already
really?
played the game.
Yeah, we played the game. Like, what are you gonna fucking do in that time frame? It's a single player game,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, I don't know, man. It's very curious. I like that question though. I like that thought process. Will they?
Too early prediction for 2025.
Mhm.
I think Tencent actually makes an offer. Whether they actually, entertain that offer, because Tencent already has an ownership stake in
And Ubisoft.
Ubisoft, and I know there's
Oh,
other ownership, um, or other investor entities that are pushing for some type of sale or breakup, shake up, removal of the board, whatever, right? Some type of major change. So, I as much as I love Tencent, um, and I don't want that to happen, but once again, something major does have to change,
no,
and it's probably going to have to happen in the next year because the gaming market's not doing well, and it's probably not going to do well next year. So,
it's not.
um,
No. We talking about GTA 6 when it comes out. It's gonna save the fucking market for like. It's gonna be the
well, no, it's
stopgap.
gonna no, it's gonna suffocate the rest of the market.
Yeah.
Everyone's just gonna buy GTA
Why?
6,
Why
and all
the
other studios are gonna
fuck
close
would
it.
I buy your game when GTA 6 is out? We're gonna
It
hit
just
two.
it
We're gonna hit like
just
250 million copies sold or some
the
stupid
day
shit.
the day after it releases, there's just going to be a blackout of every other release for like
Because
4 months.
what's gonna happen. Like, hey man, GTA 6 is out, but GTA Online 2 is not gonna come out until a month later. So you guys just like warm yourselves up to this shit, Then the modding community is gonna get to it because like, oh no, there's no PC launch. So, like, they're gonna force people to buy consoles to play the fucking game. I don't know, man. I think like my closing thoughts, my final thoughts on this are Ubisoft has kind of, now that I look back on like how they've like reacted and worked things, it felt like a nothing. It just felt like just a number of band-aid solutions where they kind of hit like certain peaks and they were like, dude, we're finally gonna get over the hump again. And then just like boom, no, and then boom, no. The fact that, and I think that this is kind of like the most crucial thing. Um, the fact that Star Wars Outlaws, a fucking Star Wars game, sold only 1 million copies in a month, and it's an open world title, and it's a new IP. The fact that it only sold 1 million is deeply concerning. And I would be like, if I'm Ubisoft, if you have not hit that fucking panic button yet, you should be smashing that bitch right now. There is no way you are sitting here and saying to yourself, as an investor, as an internal, like someone who works there internally, as someone on the board, how the fuck did we get it so wrong? How did we get it so wrong? And imagine, to compound on that, you delayed Assassin's Creed Shadows, moved it to February, the month of Wilds, one of the most anticipated games this year, next year, and you're gonna fucking go up against that beast. You better fucking make the most innovative Assassin's Creed possible, otherwise push that, delay it again. into like June, where I don't think anything is releasing. You know what I mean? Delay it once
Right.
again, because otherwise, I mean, people are gonna then, if they do it again, obviously there's gonna be questions about why would you delay it again. But I think that I would be like, I'm not competing with fucking Wilds. Like, are you out of your mind? That's Capcom, baby. Capcom. Capcom is the perfect example of a publisher that at one point I thought was dipping its toes a little bit too, or dipping its legs too far into familiar waters, and I was like, this something's got to change. And then they're like, fuck it, we're doing the completely new versions of like Resident Evil 7. Everything changed for them once they got the RE engine down, and they've been fucking nailing it since then, since like 2014, 2015. Like, that is insane. But Ubisoft is we're not saying we're excited to see them fail. Not saying that, I mean, but we are saying that, dude, it took, I think it took quicker than we expected, right? I mean, we thought it was going to be years. You and I thought Heartlands was going to come out and they were going to push for this whole mobile bullshit. And every time they had like a showcase, it was like the most fucking generic, boring thing. Like, do you guys like driving cars in The Crew? It's like, what? Fucking cars. And then
What
it's
about
like, what?
motorcycle?
Whoa! We got planes. You guys remember For Honor? It's in like it's season 10. It's like, where the fuck? You guys still make that game? It just we're at that point. And I'm honestly kind of shocked it came so quickly. I think I have to look at the video. I think we said it was like years before Ubisoft got caught up.
Yeah. Well, so I will say because you mentioned EA as well, and I think EA, regardless of what they do and how much they screw over whatever fan base for whatever game that they mess up, they at least have that security blanket of every sports title that they own, right?
Schmadden.
Like it doesn't matter what sports fans will buy the sport that they love to watch because they want to play it.
How come I can't play the
So
Chiefs? Let me
right,
play the Chiefs.
so I think they have that kind of in their back pocket. It's like, hey, we're gonna take a risk on this game with this publisher because if it does bad, we still have 19 other franchises that we can fall back onto. I don't think Ubisoft has that kind of anchor. I think all of their IPs are on a case by case basis. There's no yearly release, with the exception of probably Assassin's Creed. They're pretty reliable with spitting something out. Um, but I don't really think they have any titles like that. And once again, like one, I don't think anyone really had super high hopes for Star Wars Outlaws. Like I don't think they were like they were just gonna blow it out of the water and it was gonna be like bestseller of the year or whatever.
I just
But it's
I got excited because Massive was working on it. Like the
yeah,
Division developers. I was like, "Oh, dude, fuck yeah, let's see what they can do." And they're like, "Hey, man, we like, we like Watch Dogs. You you guys like Watch Dogs?" Yeah. It's like, "Oh."
you like cuddly companions and shallow gunfights
You like
and
you like you like average
bad stealth.
stealth? Yeah, you like average stealth? You guys like dumb AI, right? Bring them over.
Dude,
You
it's the best thing with Outlaws is when you're in a restricted area, you're in a place where you're definitely not supposed to be, and then the A is like, "Hey, you're not supposed to be here."
Yeah.
Like what? Like they're like, "Hey, I see you."
It's
Like what?
it is one of those things where I'm like, Ubisoft, like at some point, the I mean, we all get caught up on shit. Like every developer has been called out for some BS, right? Everyone has their issues. Most of them will be able to work through it. I like with Ubisoft as it is an independent publisher. It's fascinating to see like their downfall essentially because of their stubbornness and will and not and it's not that they're not introducing new IPs, right? It's that they're introducing new IPs with the same formula. So everything feels familiar. And like that works for a little bit, right? That may work for a couple of years, right? But eventually people are going to start asking, when do you guys innovate? And if you cannot realistically or seriously answer that question, I really think at this point you should look into making a change. There's nothing wrong with making a linear single player title. There's nothing wrong with making a linear title in general, but when you're constantly going back to the well, when every single game shares the same fucking formula, you take away the uniqueness regardless of what that IP actually is. If Far Cry is similar to Avatar and similar to Assassin's Creed and is similar to whatever game's next, like Ghost Recon, you're not doing anything. You're literally just like you're making who the fuck you're making these games for Ubisoft fans. Like you need to think bigger, bolder. And I don't know if Ubisoft's gonna be able to do that. But that's gonna do it for this episode of Pixelated Thoughts, where Brad and I just give Ubisoft shit because it just makes us feel better, you know? We got to have a yearly like let's fuck with these guys for a little bit, you know.
You're not going to be able to review any Ubisoft game ever again. You're going to get DMC'd.
Dude, they have sent
So
me
hard.
stuff. They've been like, hey man, do you want a fucking key to this game? I'm like, absolutely. They don't care. We're too small. They don't give a fuck, dude. One day, can you imagine the one day I make content about a Ubisoft game? They're like, has this guy talked about us before? And he goes, what the fuck? I was like, I'm on a permanent ban list from fucking Ubisoft. That would be an accomplishment. I'd wear that shit like a badge of honor. I'd create like a fucking t-shirt, right? Post it on my shoulder. Banned by Ubisoft. But that's gonna do it for this episode of Pixelated Thoughts. Let us know your comments or let us know your thoughts about Ubisoft in the comments below, because we're fucking done. Next episode is gonna be on probably Mortal Kombat, hopefully, and then Brad's gonna have some idea of some anime he's gonna make us watch. And then he's going to go on vacation because he doesn't want to be here anymore.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks, everybody, for watching.